All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mamta Bharadwaj, and I lead employer branding at the Nudge Institute. And welcome to another edition of Jigyaasa, a platform for you to hear from social sector professionals about their experiences solving some of the hardest problems from within the social sector. In this conversation, as usual, we seek answers to some critical questions that will help you unpack the journey of a social sector professional from their own perspective and hands on experience. And in the process, it will hopefully give you tools to unpack the sector as a part of your own journey. This particular edition of Jigyasa with the ecosystem, we are joined by Ravi, founder of i-Saksham. The organization, through its fellowship, empowers young women as edu leaders, leaders of change, solving education and gender challenges to drive personal and community transformation by building confidence, skills, and agency and shifting family and community mindsets. These young women are not just changing their own lives, but inspiring others to dream bigger. We are also joined by Gayathri, who heads social entrepreneurship, a part of the livelihoods ecosystem at the Nudge Institute. We look forward to Gayathri sharing her rich experience of working with multiple social startups that are and have been a part of the incubator and accelerator cohorts at the Nudge. Now, before I invite our speakers to introduce themselves, their work, and what a problem statement means to them, let's dive a little bit into the topic, right? India is unique in more ways than one. As a geographically large and diverse nation with distinct ethnic, linguistic, and cultural and socio-economic communities every few kilometers, it proposes interesting opportunities for innovation, problem solving, and growth. While the complexity is what makes it interesting, the added challenge of scale can seem a bit daunting. So, how does one begin solving for issues that are rooted in unique contextual realities? That's a very interesting question we are seeking to answer this edition and also understand how the journey of systems thinking begins. This edition, we will explore how an individual or organization can solve for diverse communities and work towards drafting a well defined problem statement that is the very beginning of this journey. A quick side note on our special feature, which we have introduced a couple of editions back, curated conversations, an opportunity for you to learn more about priority openings at the organization. This is an opportunity for you to sign up and have a direct conversation with the nudsters to learn a little more about the role and the organization. The link for you to sign up is available in the comment section. So please go ahead and register yourself for the roles that you're interested in. And now I would like to invite our speakers in, beginning with inviting them to introduce themselves and speak a little bit about how they found themselves in the social impact space. Ravi, I hand it to you.
Thank you, Mamta. It's lovely to share this space with you and Gayatri. Just a brief about me. I am Ravi Dhanuka. I co-founded i-Saksham along with my two other friends who were an erstwhile Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellow way back in 2012. i-Saksham was co-founded in 2015. How I landed up in the development impact space, I think for me it was very natural and an organic choice. So, so through education, I think my academic background was also very much related to that. So after my 12th, I did undergrad in economics from Hansraj Delhi University. After that, I went to IRMA, which specializes in rural management. The college is based in Anand, Gujarat, and I think by choosing that option, it was my first leap in that direction. And during IRMA, I also had an option to choose between a corporate life or a civil society organization's career life. I think I was naturally tilted, so I ended up being placed in a microfinance institution. So I worked there for 2 years. Also worked in the non-profit arm of that microfinance institutions on rural livelihoods and SHG formations. With organizing farmers into producer groups, etc. By then, this opportunity with Government of India came, and I always wanted to spend early years of my career in deep grassroots, where I get to work with the communities directly, or also understand how big, large-scale government schemes function. So I came here, but that time my intent was also to spend just a couple of years, but I never knew that I will get tied to the cause and the geography for decades to come. And this is where I come. So not any great inspirational story of sacrifice, very original professional story of being in this space since the beginning of the career.
Thank you, Ravi, for sharing your quirky journey with us. Whatever got you here, and we're excited about that. Gayatri, if you could share a little bit about your journey so far and how you found yourself drawn to social impact problems.
So I think it's been a cycle or a circle for me to start with. So I did start with my career after being a lecturer, and then resigning from academic post. Landed up in World Bank project that was evaluating for Nirmal Gram Puraskar, the different villages. So I think I started off from there, and then I took a corporate dive into medicine, and became a social entrepreneur, running my for-profit social entrepreneurship along with my another friend, which we started, and it continued to run, and it continues to run quite successfully. But the interesting part for me happened in the space of COVID. So we at the time were working around with 5,300 odd farmers, and we had seen a good impact that we were able to generate with the farmers. So I was really, really happy in that space. And then COVID hit, and during the COVID time, my role, which was more of uh, investor relationship, handling a few foreign overseas clients, plus my marketing role became a little redundant, which means I had a little bandwidth. And that was the time Indian Administrative Fellowship of the Nudge kind of came into being. That was the inaugural cohort of the Indian Administrative Fellowship. So I'd spoken to my board and I said, I want to try this out as a sabbatical. And because it was COVID, I think the investors were very happy, saying, okay, fine, let's. So they also wanted entrepreneurs to go and be with the government and see what we could change for the because you've been in the horticulture space and worked with smaller farmers. So I was going as a fellow designated to the horticulture department. So I remember my interview with the principal secretary of horticulture then, and I was saying how we have worked with 8,000 farmers, and he said, "What is your scale plan?" And I was talking about in a year or two we would have been around 12,000 farmers, and then he told me, "What do you think you can extend to a scale?" And that scale was 67 lakh registered farmers with which you could actually impact with one message on WhatsApp. Actually, that drew me into the Indian Administrative Fellowship. I think we got 10 different fellows working in different departments. Suddenly, you saw the scale and the problems which you should and could solve, right? Like it was very exciting to start being a part of the scale solutions. I think uh, I realized that even if you move a small needle in the positive direction for 67 lakh farmers, that makes a lot of things. So I think as individual contributors, that even as social entrepreneurs, that was not possible in that scale. So I think that was the fascinating part. And then meeting some of the social entrepreneurs. I think during the boot camp we were got invited as a part of the fellow, and then I was very intrigued by young, so people who've just taken the plunge into the space, right? Like not taking. So in fact, when I went back after the sabbatical, then I said, I want to go and do it in the impact space. And people were really surprised, saying, you are anyway doing impact. So what is the new impact you're going to create? But I think the pleasure of working with social entrepreneurs is something I couldn't resist, because as an entrepreneur myself, we've done a lot of mistakes. And I realized that the power of the mistakes is not something that comes in through. So I think when this opened up as to work with social entrepreneurs, I think it was a great decision. I think I've also worked with Ravi and team, and in a lot of places, I think it's so beautiful that when working with i-Saksham, I realized myself that in many places where i-Saksham works on for women to have voice and choice, and I was telling Ravi one day that in many places I realized that I didn't know that I had a voice at all when I was at a particular age, right? Like, because that's how social conditioned you are. And you realize that so many levels of self consciousness and things that you could kind of bring. And it's the most gratifying and meaningful job. So it's one of the best places to work. I always feel that we should have the most meaningful places to work. And I think along with the social entrepreneurs is where it is. It's kind of an ikigai moment for me, where some kind of my research, some kind of social entrepreneurship, and the social entrepreneurs kind of come in place. So, yeah, that's where my journey began.
Thank you, Gayatri. I think that was a very interesting insight. And I think most of us resonate with the most meaningful places to work being the benchmark in a way that's what sort of drives us, especially in this space. So we'll move on to the main parts of the conversation. Before that, I'd just like to call out to our audiences that we will be taking questions towards the end of the session. So please feel free to share your comments, questions for our speakers in the comment section, and we will take as many as possible towards the end. Uh, Now, straightway diving deep into the matter, Ravi, of course, as a co-founder, you don many hats. So we'd like to understand from you, how do you define a problem statement in the social sector, especially through the lenses of being an innovator, builder, an empath? How do you define a problem statement? Because there's so many complexities in the landscape that we work in. So, is there like a set of initial questions to ask? Is there a hierarchy of objectives that you define? How do you consciously decide what outcomes to focus on? I know there are many layers to these questions that I've just put across, but want to understand your perspectives on how you go about it.
So I think my first initial reaction as a social entrepreneur to the problem statement a couple of years till the couple of years back was that I think it's an underrated uh, step in the journey of starting an organization. Most of us jump with a premeditated or at least some intuitive solution in mind. I think we learned it hard way that understanding the problem and not the solution is the first very critical step to defining an intervention, right? To just to give you an idea of i-Saksham's journey, our first intuition was we saw some youths working in the community delivering tuition spaces, and we thought in a very under-resourced and remote geographies, if there are certain youths taking that initiative of running a tuition center, why not support them in improving the delivery of their services, right? So the original thinking was very much solution oriented, that we will work with certain number of youths and help improve their delivery. It took us at least 3 to 5 years and a lot of backlash with the advisors, mentors who grilled us to think that who are we solving for, right, and what are we solving for? So is it education as a delivery, or is it leadership of youth who have emerged to solve a gap in an ecosystem, right? And these two are very different lens. So if you start with a premeditated solution, most of the time you will lose the essence of the problem. And at times, I think in an entrepreneurial journey, it also works counterintuitively. At times you have an intuitive solution and then you search for a right problem, instead of always beginning with a right problem and then you search for a solution. So my learning brings me here that in order to define a problem statement, I think the first big question is, who is it for, right? Who do you want to work with? And what are their lived realities and experiences, right? So in our own journey, when we started the program, we started with a mixed cohort. It had both young men and young women. And then it took us another couple of years of piloting and pivoting to understand that the kind of social challenges that we wanted to push back, we are more concerned with women. And the way they responded to the promises of the program were very different, both in terms of aspirationally, and their own behaviors, their own expectations, and their own takeaways from the program. So my second lesson was that once we start any intervention, it may not appear to us in the beginning. So I think defining problem statement in itself is a journey. The insights we gain as part of our further deeper interactions with the people we want to work with, their realities, their experiences, and their challenges. And the third element that I would pick up is differentiating between symptoms and root causes, right? So, for example, most of the organizations working in education, for them, poor learning level could sound like a problem, right? But it's more like a symptom. It's more like an external situation of a very poor learning level in which the organization operates. And the root causes could be poorly trained teachers, not having right pedagogy, or families not being very supportive of learning or not having access to right learning materials. So how do you identify these interrelated root causes, and where do you find your niche, that in this ecosystem, out of these several root causes, these are a couple of root causes that are working well in this community, in this context. These are the where a couple of root causes where I can contribute, where I can add value, and this is where I focus. So these root causes and their implications must appear in the overall problem statement. So these are my learning, and this is where I would wrap it up. To sum it up, who is it for? What are their lived experiences that we are solving for, and how do you differentiate between root causes, its consequences, and the symptoms?
Thank you, Ravi. I think thank you for breaking that down very systematically for us. Even in that layered question, like I said earlier, the fact that you were able to break it down and make it sound so simple to us is very interesting. Gayatri, I'd like to bring the similar question to you and request you to speak from an experience of having worked with and observed multiple organizations that are a part of our incubator and accelerator cohort. For you to share your thoughts on how you would describe the journey of arriving at a problem statement. What are the key factors that organizations should focus on, and what are the pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, I think I'm going to draw a little more from Ravi and kind of stretch it out there. So one of the things is that there is an pitfall is expert fallacy, right? In many places, we just assume that natural farming, in my way, is the way that the farmers in a particular geography happens. And it's a lot of times the entrepreneur has to be coachable, and that becomes a very because you will have great mentors who will come, like Ravi is saying, 5 years of mentorship, right? Like people will come and ask you those tough questions, and I think to hold that expert ground and not be coachable becomes one of the biggest pitfalls an entrepreneur can have, because uh, instead of understanding a particular farming methods, how are the lives going to be affected, you're not going to be able to bring the change. The other things I've seen, luckily for us, I think, because we have a very so around this year, if I were to think about 530 organizations that came in, and then we have taken 9 organizations into the incubator. So we don't, in our cohorts, we don't see much of people that they struggle with the problem statement, because a lot of them have done a groundwork in the space. But it's also important to start seeing the net impact, right? Like, say, for example, let me take an anecdote. There is a village, and there is a industry in that village, or a small manufacturing unit. So this immediately seems like, oh, I can solve this problem. There is unemployment, so I will do the training from for these people and then place them into this industry. If the non-profit did not exist, for example, for the industry also, this is the only captive labor force. So they would have anyway done that, right? So if you were to see, while you created this solution, seemed like a solution, but the net impact of your presence and absence might have been the same. So it's very important to understand, hey, how do you assess the net impact of these solutions? And the third common mistakes that will happen is coming from the funding ecosystem. So because for the first 3 years, funding is very, very difficult, because you're still not CSR ready or not FCRA ready. So what happens is that there will be a little bit of stretch that people do ask, right? Like, so if the stretch is linear to your goals, it is easier to stretch, but it's also important for entrepreneurs to not deviate, because there is a funding opportunity available. Most likely that they do take those options, because to keep their impact going, because then they become there in the impact. And in all of this, I want to draw from my neuroscience experience with working with, say, if you think of communities, the reason why we all moved as from an ape to what we are today is that we've had certain wins. We could anticipate pleasure, right? So you can study well today, so tomorrow. So if a monkey is sitting there and it's able to say put a stick inside an ant hole, and it got a win that says, okay, I could take the ant. So the next day it sharps the stick, and then the next day it should find a lizard. So even while nonprofits are working with communities, the communities also should see smaller wins, right? They should start seeing some smaller wins for them to be working with the community. There is also an unfortunate issue that happens is the shimmery of nonprofits. When what happens is whenever you work with nonprofits, say we had a nonprofit who had worked with 160 disadvantaged youth from historically marginalized communities, and 84 of them actually cleared the cat. But then the question was, what happened to the others, right? In the outside world, it is point 0.1, right? So the same thing will happen, saying, okay, you have trained, say, if to Ravi, 800 women, tell me how many people became leaders, right? So a lot of the things that there is a pyramid in the outside world, and that will be reflected in every part of society is also there. So it's not like social sector will have a wand and suddenly you can wave it and things will go away. And these become slightly difficult unless the entrepreneur kind of really holds to the North Star mission and says, have that kind of thing. So these are also coming from the pressures of the ecosystem. It's not necessarily entrepreneur driven, but pressures of the ecosystem of saying, how do I work with the communities? Small wins I have to give them so that they start believing in me. How do I work with funders who are asking me to stretch beyond certain place? How do I work with governments who for whom I have to squeeze a little more to kind of fit into the space? And how do I work with this expectation of shimmery, right? Like saying suddenly there'll be a wand that's waved, and then every person that you touch will be showered with gold, right? Like if entrepreneurship, 98% of entrepreneurs have a survival chance, that will be reflected in irrespective of if it's a organization, that will be the same thing, right? Uh, yeah, that's
Thanks,
points.
thanks, Gayatri. I think several things that you said bring me to the next part of the questions that I had in mind. Of course, the net impact, and most importantly, it's about, like Ravi spoke about earlier also, right? Who are we trying to solve for? What are the small wins, like Gayatri said? I'd like to bring the conversation a little bit to that space. But before that, for people joining us late, once again, please feel free to share your comments and questions with us in the comment section, and we'll try and answer as many as possible and bring it to Gayatri and Ravi towards the end of the session. So, Ravi, the next question that I have for you is in the context of who are we solving for, right? And the small wins and the communities, putting them in the center. How do we contextualize solutions and ensure that the program design aligns with local customs? Because you cannot be at loggerheads or have disparate objectives from the communities that we're working with. So how do we sort of bring that all onto the same page?
I think I'll also build on with what Gayatri already said, right? Because it's very important to win alignment with the community and earn those wins, right? Where community also celebrates. So first, we'll also have to understand what are the existing practices which are in alignment with the program design, and what is it that community celebrates. So to again to give I-Saksham's context, for us to we needed to find a programmatic way to promote what Gayatri said, voice and choice for everyone, right? And in order to promote that voice and choice, we need to create those small wins where women feel that they have a voice, right? And they have say in on the decision making table. What could be those easier pathways? What could be those easier pathways which can help get that right? And through our intuitions, through our learnings on the field, we realized that coaching children to achieve their aspirations, helping children, let's say, attend school well, is one of the most cherished way for community to see an impact. Now, if a young woman in their respective communities can enroll 10, 15 out of school girls who have not been able to attend school because of several systematic constraints, if she can do that, then it's one of the greatest exhibition of the leadership, right? Similarly, I will then link it up to the first question that we were discussing, root causes, interlinked root causes, and what is happening in the community. So a certain problem, it is independent of its context, can have n different root causes, right? But as an organization, you cannot work on all the root causes. So you would see that in your target communities, which root causes are taken care of by the ecosystem, and in which root causes you see a gap where you can contribute. Now, this gap analysis and understanding of those root causes cannot happen in isolation of the context. Otherwise, you can design anything and implement anywhere, and it would get all the theoretical successes on the paper. And we know that this is not how it works. And that's why it's very important to understand that in your context, what is it that the context demands, and what is it that you want to do, and what is it that you can do well. I think it is at an intersection of these three that the seeds of the real impact lies.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Sorry. Thank you, Ravi, for that. Just moving on to the next part, right? Thank you for sharing those contexts about contextualizing solutions and also working with communities closely to understand where they stand and what they aspire for and what really is the small win or the big wins for them. In this context, Gayathri, I'd like to bring you in and have you talk a little bit about something that we hear a lot at the Nudge, and I think the walls at the Nudge also echo scale. So, how do we bring this aspect of scale when we are talking about community voices in a country like India, in localization in a country like India, where there are so many differences every time the geography changes or the space changes. So, how do you bring scale when we're talking about customizing for and listening to local voices?
It's actually an interesting question. So I'm going to dip into an expert who ran a workshop for our accelerator organization, Vivek Sundar, who has been ex-Swiggy, ex-PNG. And what is interesting is that he talked about scale from a perspective of an innovator, the person who designs the problem, a scaler, okay, a person who can then create playbooks, right, like a clear playbook, and an executor, right, who will be executing on the ground. So if I were to just think of the context, right, like say for example, say a Q math class for everybody to just understand. Q math class in many contexts across the globe was the question the parent was putting for a class was to say that my child should not have the fear of mathematics. Okay, so you address the fear of mathematics. So the actual playbook for the context basically was, how do you do playway methods? How do you first not first talk about, say, first 4 classes don't talk about the word math at all, and just talk about the child, their interest, and then talk about different elements, and then kind of bring these aspects of it. So the scaler writes a playbook depending on the context, and then wherever this context is possible, then they kind of execute. Say the same thing when they were coming to India, they realized that here, if you say 4 classes that the parent is only my money will go on you talking about generally chatting, I don't think parents are happy. They want marks, right? So the entire contextually you can change many elements. So the whole thing on scale is, first of all, the vision of an entrepreneur, saying how do you want to take it to scale, and creating these playbooks. A lot gets missed in organizational memory, right? Like from when an entrepreneur takes it, and when the CXO team kind of comes in, and then the next team comes in, then the next team comes in, the more everybody is going to innovate in their own ways, then it becomes very difficult to scale a problem. So once you've identified a core problem and you've found a way in which it works, like for example, in say, let's take i-Saksham case, is that the very beautiful way is that if I have not had a voice myself as a woman in my house, I'm never going to be suddenly, if you put me in a situation where it's all adults and men, I'm not going to be able to exercise my voice. And how do you bring them into a context where it is children? Children are very excited, right? Like in general, children are very excited. So if you are working with, say, 5-year-old and 6-year-old children, they will listen to your voice. So if you teach them to dance, if you teach them to sing, they're going to listen to you, right? That's the first step for a woman to kind of exercise the voice. And then talk to the parent, not about general life or please up a change karo. Just talk about saying what you could do for your own child, right? You change that exercise of voice. So here, the very clear understanding is that you have to create a context in which the voice is possible, right? So the playbook has to be written in contextually. What happens is you may change from A to B, right? But the context where you could involve children, context where it is less threatening for an teenage girl who's coming out of the family for the first time, that stays, right? Certain elements of the social problem remains, right? There is a fire in the belly. They are feeling homeless. There is a need for an agency. There is a need for confidence. There, in in general, there is more similarities than differences. Yes, contextualization is a requirement. Maybe India differs, maybe North India differs, maybe South India differs, but it might be on elements, but not on the core issues, right? The core issue is that you don't have a voice, and because you don't know, you're not even aware of you don't having a voice, you don't have a choice, and that's been reinforced, right? So I think just to identify those elements and creating these playbooks, which we all miss out, right? I think in the for-profit sector, the playbook becomes the T. They actually put down an effort. There are parts of PNG who actually put down this playbook, and then the executor runs the playbook and then comes back. Here, what happens is just because it is so there is that playbook, the organization memory starts getting diluted, and that's where we feel that hey, it cannot be scaled, right? A lot of these problems, if you were to think of across the best social problems that has been solved, be it Aadhaar, be it UPI, we have found solutions. So there are scalable. Uh, it is important for an entrepreneur to start. It also starts with the mindset. If you're going to think that, hey, every human being is different, then you cannot run schools, right? Like every human being is different. You can't run offices. You can't run a society. You cannot have a road because if everybody. So the very idea that this is never going to scale because it is contextual itself becomes a hampering to it. I'm not saying I'm not taking away the nuances of contextualization, things like that, but the very thought, so the depth in which, say, for example, an organization like Ravi can, of course, add on to it. They've understood the core of the problem, said beautiful elements that can bring the voice out, and how these women can go and form their own communities and change from there. If the community owns the change, right? If I am being approached, I am as an edu leader approached by 10 families to say, please मेरे बच्चे का ना वो पढ़ नहीं रहा है तो आप advice कर दो. Suddenly you elevate yourself. So there the just these are elements are scalable. Just to identify those elements are very, very important. So you can scale also. When you think of scale, you should think of scale depth, scaling across, you are leveraging technology, leveraging AI, so many elements. Yeah, I think Ravi should add on how beautifully they've integrated Gemini AI to create coaching conversations. And today, the same quality is able to be done by an AI. So I think we are sitting at in a beautiful stage where scale is possible with depth. So I think it is also for us to assume that scale is possible. That's when we'll start. If you start thinking scale is not possible, then you will find all the ways why that scale is not possible. But if entrepreneurs start to think, say, scale is possible, let me find the way, they will find the way.
Thanks, Gayatri, for sharing those, the aspects of your understanding of the differences and the similarities and how scale is possible even with contextualization. Here, Ravi, I'd like to bring your thoughts on building on this, on, when you work with such different identities and varying objectives and priorities in different, geographies, different demographics, how do you then zero down on the set of people that you are going to work with? What is the process? What is the criteria? Where is that first step, and how do you take that?
So I think, yeah, I mean, very much. I think this should be taken care of at the stage of defining your problem itself. But once it is out there and assume that you will then have to choose whom to work with, I think the first response should come from your heart rather than your brain, right? Working with whom gives you happiness. Who is most affected by the problem? And for an intervention like us, which is a leadership intervention, uh, along with that, what also matters is who can be a great catalyst for change. Right? And Gayatri was talking about her, reflecting on her experiences of when she realized that she could have that voice. So, Gayatri, a question to you: what age you were when you reflect back that you should have exercised that voice, if you don't mind? Which age bracket was that?
Mamta, this question was for you.
Gayatri? I thought you were asking Gayatri.
No, this was for Gayatri. Gayatri, I was asking you, yeah, which age bracket?
Oh my God, you're. So I think this was 2 years back, and I realized that a lot of the choices that I did not exercise as my life. This I'm talking when I'm in 45 to 50 is when I realized what I missed out because I assumed that this was not even a voice. This is not a space for me to
Yes.
talk, right? Uh, yeah, if I had got an edu leader uh, at my 17, 18, probably I would have defined my life very, very differently.
Right, very true. So this was our insight was as well, Mamta. So that the 17, 18, once you pass your grade 12th, is that age very critical window where if you don't get exposed to an alternate path, you are very likely to lead a very typical life trajectory. Right? So from here comes a very focused youth segment for us that so the 70% of our cohort actually comes at that age, yeah, around 18 to 19 years. And which is the second window, that is. So I would respond the second window that we understood was when they are newly married, when they are 2 to 3 years into their married life. If you don't set your kind of a second life right in the initial days, then again it's very difficult to go back and reset the family now. So then we came with the second age bracket, which is around 27, 28, 29. So the 30% of our cohort comes with that age group. You talked of different identities, so that also has implications with identities of caste, the socioeconomic background, etc. So with 3, 4 years into the intervention, we also realized that 18 could be a bit late for many girls, especially from scheduled communities because of pressures of early marriage, right? So if you wait till 18, then you would lose 50, 60% of them. So they would need an intervention early in their life. So that insight helped us design an adolescent program where our fellows now, along with working with children, a certain segment is then focused on adolescents who start intervention at the age of 13. So what our fellows learn as concepts of gender, identity, reflecting on their aspirations, they conduct similar exercises for adolescents so that when they grow 18, at least some of them would have pushed those boundaries and they would be at a different pedestal from which a phase two intervention could be initiated with them where they could exercise their voice and choice on different life choices that
Great. Thank you, Ravi, for sharing that very nuanced understanding and the value of investing in understanding these choices, these life choices, and their context, because that informs what you do so very closely, right? So that was really interesting to hear about. Here, I'd like to zoom out a bit and bring Gayatri in. And as much as we spoke about contextualization, scale, and how much it's important to listen, I'd also like to bring the aspect of how important it is to understand the landscape and how it impacts the problem statement and how we define objectives. And when I say landscape, it could be emerging technologies, it could be what is currently getting funded, what are the problems that are currently getting the spotlight. Just want to understand from Gayatri how that impacts the process of defining a problem statement.
I think the landscape becomes very crucial, right? Like, so when I'm talking about landscape, there are two parts of the landscape. First of all, a little more depth understanding, like, say, for example, so if you are working with trans communities, there is a lot of nuances to trans communities that you'll really need to go inside and understand. Even when we work with gender, right? Like, so it's not easy to just assume from your lens. So one is understanding the whom it is for, like Ravi had said, right? Like, so understanding the landscape of the people for whom we are solving. The second is also understanding the entire social entrepreneur ecosystem. And I feel the good part is in if you were to see Simon Sinek, he had to really do this why, what, how kind of a thing, and then talk about the why. And what I've found in social entrepreneurs is that they have a very strong why, right? They don't start with saying what, then how, and then you don't need to start with saying, hey, you should define the why, but because they come with a lot of why. Where it is very important to understand is also understanding who are solving for this problem, how and why, right? Like, so when you think of the entire landscape of social entrepreneurs who are solving this problem, that gives you a very deep understanding, even for people who want to come into the sector, who want to understand, just to understand, saying who are all working in the gender spaces. Say there is i-Saksham, there is Launch Girls, there is the Vigyan Chala. So there are a lot of people working on different aspects, and how are they approaching agency, for example, right? Like saying what age group, what does agency mean, how each one is defining agency. So even if you don't think of, because each of these contextual understanding is very, very vast, right? It takes somebody a lifetime, right? Like there are PhD people who are just working on menstruation health from the age of say 25, and they finish their PhD early, and to the age of 60, and they just not even covered enough, right? So for a person who wants to, who's very enthused by the space and who wants to kind of get into the space, I think the easiest thing is to understand the landscape of solvers, right? Who's solving for what and how. I give you a very, very good insights on how and why they are using that a little way, rather than trying from the who it is solving for if it's difficult, but to understand the entire landscape on who are these entrepreneurs, because the entrepreneurs are easier to find. So even in our Nudge website, we have our 139 amazing entrepreneurs who are there. So just going and seeing who are all the people and what are the problems solving for, I think gives you a very good ideas of the landscape, so to say.
Thanks, Gayatri. I'd like to take the last section of this conversation to answer a few tactical questions for our audience in terms of for them to understand how they can be a part of this sector, this journey that India is on to solve social problems, right? So maybe we'd like to get both your opinions. We could start with Ravi on how someone who's interested in contributing to specific areas in the sector can go about identifying opportunities, just from your own experience and from maybe people that you've observed in the sector, people that you work with, if you have any thoughts to share for aspirants in the sector.
Right, sure. So one is the education pathway, Mamta. So people who are interested uh, to begin their career in the social sector space actually get into such institutes and courses which put them on a natural trajectory for this space. So I think this is an easier problem to solve. These institutes are well known. There are also so many fellowships coming up, which act as a lateral entry pathways uh, for such spaces. So looking out for those fellowships for people with let's say 3 to 5 years of experience. People who are in undergrad could explore relevant postgraduate courses which would help them get into this sector. The other ways to also the lighter ways to do internships with some of these organizations as part of your curriculum, which helps you gain an exposure to this space. The other informal ways could be very accidental, right? If you know someone working in this space, be it from your family, distant relatives, or friends, spend some time, get to visit those places, see if it aligns with your interests, with your strengths. So at times, I think people also get romanticized by the promise of doing good and helping someone. It's not always that easy. If you come with the intent of doing it anything for someone else, it will always end up frustrating you because you would realize that the other person may not need it as much as you thought. you are eager to give. So I think journey should always begin from what you want, what is your primary motivation, and the way to find those opportunities could be plenty depending upon at which stage of your career and academics you are in. For working professionals, I think Nudge also created some of those pathways like Indian Administrative Fellowships. I think some large, big NGOs also look out for people with diverse corporate career opportunities to join them. So maybe a shorter stints, treating it maybe like a sabbatical or maybe a 2 or 3 year break before you take any conclusive call could be one of those ways for senior people to take that call.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks for highlighting the fact that you really need to go inward and listen to yourself and really question what do you want to do. I think, as generic as it may sound, it's something that I say all the time as well, having been in the social or development sector for a while now. I think the answer really lies there, and for us to spend time with ourselves to see what it is that we really want to make a dent in. Gayatri, would like to bring you in on this question as well, in terms of any words of advice, any tips on how one should go about identifying opportunities, especially if they're interested in certain areas within the sector.
So I think I will resonate with both of your things. It has to really come from a deep and thorough introspection, right? Like what where it should stem from is that why that solving of the problem is very very critical for you, right? Like sometimes there is an innate need, right? Like saying I like why is social enterprise very very important, why was gender very exciting for me, what so it's important to understand what need that it satisfies in yourself, because that's very very important. Like Ravi was talking saying he just don't go into saying the fallacy of saying, oh, this is so cool, I can write about it or things like that. It's very very so it's important for you to understand saying why, what is that need that's solving. So I think that part becomes very crucial. One of the things definitely don't do is thinking that saying, hey, I have had a very very stressful job, so I'm planning to come to NGO sector because I want to have a meaningful and a low whatever life, right? Like so, because this problem is as wicked or as complicated and as challenging, or in fact 3 times more challenging than any of your corporate jobs that you would have ever done, right? Like, because this continuous learning and things like that. I'm quoting from Harish Hande once told, saying, if anybody says, oh, please, I'll volunteer for people in the village working with rural women, then I say my rural women want to come and work on your mainframes. Can you kind of open the doors, right? It's as complicated, right? One is, as long as we shouldn't assume that uh, this is the kind of things that you have, and also really see if you are ready to put that kind of effort. Because if you're really good at cooking, you shouldn't start a restaurant, right? Like, because what does happen is that 95% of the time you're not running the restaurant, you're not cooking, you're doing everything else, right? So that's also a space that you'll have to understand that, oh, I love working with children. And then you will realize that only part of the work will there, because you will be doing other things, you will be doing some proposals and things like that. So it's also the clarity on what you want to do, why do you want to do, how do you want to build your career in the space. All of that stems from personal needs. And then for me is again going and seeing solvers. So the easiest way is to find organization that's already solving for it. And a lot of these entrepreneurs are very very open in just having conversations with different people. Just go and visit them, volunteer for some time, touch, so you don't jump into a swimming pool, right? Touch the waters, feel the waters, and then go into it, so that this passion and the needs are kind of satisfied. So entirely you'll have to have that conversation with you, saying what will you 10 years from now feel happy about if you're taken this plunge, if it did not give you any other recognition, if it did not give you any other salary, what would you do for free, right? So
Right.
what would make you very very happy that you will write about yourself 10 years from now? And these are very difficult questions. And what is that innate need that is asking you to go into the impact space, and is it strong enough, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes from those spaces. But I would say for anybody who's coming into the space, find social solvers, because they give you a greater understanding into the problem. Don't try to go into some places, because if you go into a space of somebody who's working with trans communities, you understand the nuances a lot better than you trying to decipher problem from your space. And yeah, there's always transferable skills. Come The only thing I think is very important in the sector is your learnability. You have to be continuously open to learning and continuously be open to being challenged with wicked social issues that you wouldn't have thought otherwise.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like for you to build a little bit more on that, Gayatri. We've spoken about introspection. We've spoken about the need for intent, which is the primary step towards the sector. But a little bit about transferable skills and skills to focus on to make the sector and our work a little more accessible to someone who might not be aware of what is there, to what the sector has to offer in terms of jobs and career prospects, right? Like even in the Nudge, we speak about central roles like marketing, like finance, like fundraising. These could be skills that can be borrowed from other sectors and other job roles and can be very much utilized in the sector effectively. If you could speak a little bit to that.
No, I think there are a lot of transferable skills. I've heard things, right? Like people management is a transferable skill, right? How do you create high performance team is a very, very transferable skill that you can kind of bring in from the sector to kind of uh, create a very smart goal and get the whole rallying the team around the goal is a great. If you are a self leader and a positive speaker, so that's a great transferable skill. And all the youngsters out there, your Instagram skill is a very transferable skill, which you don't realize the power of it. How you probably could. I've seen 11-year-old, 12-year-old are able to hack Instagram so beautifully and have 5,000, 10,000 followers. You put adults like me to shame. You're very surprised, right? Like so, what is generally your way of living might be a very transferable skill, right? Your power of seeing the world through an AI lens might be a very transferable skills. I think we all learned online presence. How do you take a offline program online is a very transferable skill, right? Like this generation has kind of the COVID generation who've been younger professionals at the time has easily taken to online. We're doing jigyaasa online, right? It's such a beautiful way. So I think it is about the intention to contribute, the passion with which you come. So every aspect of your skill can become transferable, right? Just bringing in the positive energy, we don't realize that it's a great transferable skill, right? So in any team, if there is somebody and yes person, right? Like there is a power in no. I'm not denying it, but just having somebody who says yes, let's do it, irrespective. Let's go try it out, right? That's a huge power that you can bring to the team. So every aspect of a personality, so to say, is a transferable skill to not only to the social sector, to any sector. So it's about you wanting to bring your fullest into the space. Yeah, that's the space. Your marketing space. Many spaces are there, even if it is a lateral entry. I think.
Yeah, thanks, Gayathri. That was very interesting because these are things that we've almost, these are energies that are palpable when we work with people on a daily basis, and it was something very relatable the way you put it. We are moving towards the end of the session. We'll have to wind up really quickly now. And before we do that, Ravi, I'd like to bring you in for some closing comments on what you think would be your final words of advice for someone who's unsure about moving into the social sector, who has some ideas in mind but does not know how to go about solving it and wants to contribute to the space and wants to contribute to the larger good, like we call it. How would you say they begin this journey and traverse this journey? And since you've been there and done that, words of advice from your end.
No, I think I would just pick this thread from whatever you said, Mamta. I think the first step should be to dig deeper from where your uncertainty emerging from, right? Uh, it's not going to be easy. The sector has its own challenges and uncertainties attached to it. The payoffs are never very well guaranteed. Uh, Not to say that you can't have a predictable career path, but uh, many people get disillusioned with the sector very early as well. So I think it's very important to find out your right triggers. for it, right? For someone like me who has been into this profession, I think for me the answer has always been very clear. So, like anyone who, why would anyone choose doctor as a profession or teacher as a profession? You would have a very similar answer for why would you choose social sector as a profession. You feel passionate about it. You feel that this is what you want to do. The I think the only risk at times that we fall prey to is uh, get so many unsaid get caught by so many unsaid charms of the space, which you feel that it's not there because it's. I mean, if a donor comes to me and say that I want to help you, I want to support you, the first thing I would look for is my dignity first before the money, right? So the same thing would happen with the people whom we work with. It cannot be from a top-down lens that you are going to there to help someone. It's a professional space. It's like solving any other problem in corporate world. You solve problems to create values, to create value for your customers. You meet a need. In social space also, you meet a need. You bridge a gap through a technical or a social technical solutions, right? In for profits, it's always technical products here. So many of your solutions are also changing society. So if that excites you, if changing norms, if changing behaviors excite you, then this is the place to be.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Gayatri, for joining us for this conversation, for sharing your insights, learnings, and some very charming anecdotes from your journeys and interactions. And thank you to our audience as well for joining us this evening. We'll meet you again for the next edition of Jigyasa, just calling out our curated conversations opportunity again. If you are interested in roles at the Nudge, sign up through the link in the comments. It's an exclusive opportunity for interested candidates who are aligned with certain role expectations to prepare for the application process by having conversations with people who are already solving those problems within the organization. And as usual, the Nudge is hiring for a range of roles across functions. Do visit our website to understand and explore these opportunities. And once again, thank you for attending. We will see you in the next edition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mamta. Thank you, Gayatri.
Thanks, Ravi. Yes.